Donald Trump's announcement to impose a 50% tariff on Brazilian imports, particularly coffee, has shaken the very foundations of global trade. The decision is not merely an economic measure, it represents a seismic political move with consequences stretching from the plantations of Brazil to the coffee shops of New York, from the financial corridors of Washington to the boardrooms of Beijing. This moment reveals how one policy decision can ripple across markets, cultures, and households worldwide. Coffee is not just a drink. It is the world's second most traded commodity after oil, a daily ritual for billions, and an industry sustaining millions of farmers, traders, and entrepreneurs. Brazil is by far the largest producer of coffee, supplying about 1/3 of global demand. The United States, on the other hand, consumes enormous quantities of coffee but produces barely 1% of its needs domestically. This dependency makes the U.S. market particularly vulnerable to shifts in import policies. By targeting Brazil, Trump has struck at the very artery of America's morning routine. The tariffs are scheduled to apply not only to coffee but also to beef, soybeans, and other Brazilian exports. However, coffee remains the most symbolic and emotionally resonant of these commodities. Within hours of the announcement, coffee traders scrambled to redirect shipments, trying to deliver as much product as possible to U.S. ports before the tariffs took effect. Brazilian exporters, represented by the powerful café lobby, reported that American buyers requested postponements, desperate to avoid paying higher prices. In July, Brazil's coffee exports had already dropped by over 28% year-on-year. Arabica shipments fell by more than 20%, and Robusta nearly halved. The new tariffs threatened to slash even more from this lifeline. For consumers, the impact was immediate and visible. In cities like New York, Boston, and Chicago, coffee shop owners reported wholesale prices skyrocketing. Some chains warned that they would either have to raise prices sharply or close their doors entirely. Independent cafe owners, already operating on razor-thin margins, expressed despair. One owner told reporters, "If these tariffs stay, our business is over. Customers won't pay double for a cup of coffee, but we can't absorb this cost either." The burden is now trickling down directly to the consumer, and a basic cup of coffee could soon become a luxury for many. The global reaction was swift. Brazil's government condemned the move, calling it blackmail and vowing retaliation. President Lula pledged to challenge the U.S. at the World Trade Organization, accusing Washington of undermining fair trade principles. Simultaneously, Brazil sought to diversify its export markets. China immediately stepped in, approving 183 new Brazilian coffee exporters to ship directly into its growing market. This strategic pivot demonstrated Brazil's resilience and its unwillingness to remain hostage to U.S. trade politics. For Trump, the political calculation was clear: appeal to domestic farmers, industrial workers, and protectionist voters who believe global trade deals have disadvantaged America. Tariffs are framed as tools to bring jobs back home and reduce dependency on foreign imports. Yet critics argue the opposite. Tariffs on a vital commodity like coffee will not revive American agriculture but will instead fuel inflation, punish small businesses, and strain international relations. Economists warn that such aggressive tariffs risk sparking a broader trade war, reminiscent of past crises that spiraled into global recessions. The symbolism of coffee itself cannot be underestimated. Coffee houses have historically been places of politics, culture, and community. From the Enlightenment-era cafes of Europe to the bustling Starbucks chains of the United States, coffee is not just a beverage but a cultural glue. The idea that tariffs could restrict access to affordable coffee strikes at both the economic and psychological comfort of millions. The morning cup is no longer taken for granted, it becomes a symbol of how global politics infiltrate everyday life. The ripple effects extend far beyond the US and Brazil. Countries across Europe, Asia, and Africa are watching closely. Many fear that if Washington can so abruptly target Brazil, it may weaponize tariffs against others. The precedent challenges the very stability of international trade systems built over decades. Moreover, with coffee prices already volatile due to climate change, droughts, pests, and shifting weather patterns affecting yields, the tariffs only add another layer of instability. Smallholder farmers in Brazil, many already struggling, now face further uncertainty. Some may abandon coffee altogether, switching to crops less vulnerable to global politics, which in turn could reshape the entire supply chain. There is also the historical context. Governments have long intervened in the coffee market. In 1906, Brazil signed the Taubaté Agreement to stabilize coffee prices, protecting farmers from collapse. Later, During the Cold War, the International Coffee Agreement regulated global supply to ensure fair prices. Yet these interventions were designed to safeguard stability. Trump's tariffs, by contrast, destabilize the system deliberately, weaponizing trade for political leverage. This inversion of historical precedent alarms both economists and diplomats. The U.S. Consumer Price Index has already begun reflecting the impact. Analysts project coffee inflation could reach double digits within months, directly contributing to overall food inflation. For average families, this means either spending more on coffee or cutting back altogether. In Maine, a local café owner told journalists, "We're dreading the tariffs. Coffee is the lifeblood of our business. Without affordable beans, we can't survive." The human element is undeniable. This is not just about macroeconomics but about livelihoods. Brazil, meanwhile, is not sitting idle. Its finance minister has initiated talks with alternative markets, strengthening ties with China, the Middle East, and Europe. By broadening its customer base, Brazil hopes to reduce vulnerability to U.S. whims. At the same time, Brazil has filed a complaint at the WTO, questioning the legitimacy of the U.S. trade probe that led to the tariffs. Whether the WTO can resolve the dispute remains uncertain, especially given America's history of disregarding unfavorable WTO rulings. Trump's critics at home argue that the tariffs are short-sighted. They warn that the move may win short-term political points but will erode America's credibility as a trading partner. Allies may begin to seek alternative markets, bypassing the U.S. altogether. For consumers, the costs are already being felt. For businesses, the uncertainty undermines investment and planning. And for the global system, the precedent of sudden, sweeping tariffs without negotiation threatens to unravel decades of trade liberalization. Yet Trump's supporters view the policy as strength, proof that America will no longer be exploited. For them, paying more for coffee is a small price for national sovereignty and economic independence. This narrative resonates with a significant segment of the electorate, particularly those skeptical of globalization. As the 2025 U.S. election approaches, tariffs on coffee may become more than an economic issue, they could become a cultural flashpoint in the broader debate about America's role in the world. Ultimately, the story of coffee tariffs is about more than beans and cups. It encapsulates the intersection of economics, politics, and daily life. It shows how decisions made in the White House reverberate in distant farms, busy ports, and neighborhood cafes. It highlights the fragility of global supply chains, the risks of protectionism, and the resilience of nations like Brazil that refuse to bow. What happens next remains uncertain. If tariffs remain, U.S. consumers will face higher prices, small businesses may collapse, and Brazil will pivot further toward Asia. If negotiations resume, there is hope for compromise, but the trust between Washington and Brasilia may already be fractured. Either way, coffee will never again be seen as just a drink. It is now a symbol of a world where every sip carries the weight of politics, economics, and identity.